like either you're on the road or there's a ditch. So there's no good place for the kids to stand, right? So then, and then this other bus, they were,
And we got
actually took videos of it when my kids were younger. Because it was dangerous. There were like 3 buses that came within like 2 minutes of each other. And you got these kids standing on this corner, and these buses would go by. And then they'd go down this, there was a dead end, right, with a circle, and then they'd be turning around the circle, and some of the kids were walking at the same time the bus is like doing a 3-point turn on the circle, and they're like right next to the bus, like they could easily be
All right. All right. Let's begin tonight. We're going to start with public comment. First, I'd like to thank everyone in the audience for coming and everyone tuning in at home. Welcome to this business meeting. I'll first read the expectations. The school board encourages community input while comments and questions are welcome. Law prohibits the board from discussing concerns about individual employees or students in a public meeting. The board will not deliberate, discuss, or engage in conversation with speakers. However, the board may ask administration to review the concerns presented. Speakers must present their testimony in a respectful manner. Vulgarity, character attacks, malice, or specific complaints identifying staff or students by name or implication will not be permitted. We will stop the proceedings immediately if employee or student privacy issues are raised and direct the speaker to forward comments regarding individual employees or students to the superintendent. And with that, our first speaker this evening is Catherine Hobbs. You just sit right there. Here. Up here? Right by the
right next to the microphone.
And Director Hockert will have the pen and cue cards for the 3 minutes. Thank
you. Hi, I'm Catherine Hobbs. I just wanted to comment that I really think you should move the Spanish immersion to Oak Park instead of the high school program, because the Spanish immersion program is going to get much larger, I think. It's only expected to grow. I mean, my own sister wants to put her kid into that program from the dual preschool. And also the high schoolers don't want to leave and be deprived of the opportunities available there. On to the next thing. I'm going to keep this very vague so as to abide by the laws and the privacy of the people involved. But I heard of a couple highly concerning incidents, of bullying. And I heard that they were handled poorly, and I just want to know what assurance you can give concerned parents that this issue of disciplinary incompetence, for lack of a better phrase, will be resolved in a meaningful way, so it won't harm other people's children. I just feel like there wasn't any accountability for the victims, and after all the talk of safety and equity, it just honestly feels like business as usual, like failed zero tolerance policies were. I really don't think the district has an equity problem. I think it has a discipline problem. I mean, if administrators' hands are tied, what are they tied by? What are the point of the policies if they won't be properly followed? The idea that they might solve inequality and bullying is just honestly a Trojan horse for ushering in untested progressive ideologies into our schools. And I would like to remind the board and other district leadership that discipline in a case of cyberbullying, even outside of school hours and off of school property, is in fact covered under state statute regarding discipline. Our children are not agents of change for anyone. I know most within the district work hard and are good people who only have good intentions, but teaching virtues like kindness does not have to come hand in hand with untested political ideologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker this evening is Jessica Johnson.
Hello, directors, Dr. Funk. Jessica Johnson, Oak Street, Stillwater. I would like to address that Allison so graciously asked if I'd like to come and speak in regards to some ideas that the community and I have discussed over the last 10 months that they would like to maybe get some representation at the table for. And I wanted to acknowledge that I thought that was very honorable. And at the present time, I'd like to have those discussions in person. So tonight, I just wanted to point out that there's a large portion of the district's residents that aren't in agreement with the focus of the current school board, and presumptively, don't feel that they're going to be represented for the next couple of years if they stay here, which is quite sad because I think, like all of us, we agree that we love Stillwater. We have a great history here, and a lot of families spent a lot of time working to make it what it is today. Door knocking, I learned that quite a few residents have left the district. They weren't comfortable with the school system, and they didn't feel safe in coming forward or didn't have the energy or the time to fight for the changes that they felt were necessary. Bear with me, my fingers are too cold to turn the page. These families, unfortunately, are waiting for either an opportunity to move their children to private schools or their families to an entirely different state. The most common reason that I've heard of is the pedagogy, the way in which the curriculum is being taught at the schools, followed by the academic outcomes and fiscal irresponsibility. This portion of the population sees that their money could be better spent on smaller class sizes, more educators, and fewer construction projects. In regards to Oak Park remodel specifically, back in March, Allison had stated that they wanted to move. I would love it if you'd be able to clarify who they are. Is it the ALSA students, the teachers? There's also some concerns that haven't been addressed as to how these kids are going to get to specialty courses offered at the high school. And lastly, the kids in the program that I've spoken to don't want to be separated. So a lot of talk has been had that they want to move to a different building, want to be outside of the high school. And I'd like to know which children those are, because of the dozen that I've spoken to, they don't want to be separated, isolated, or made to look any more different than they already are. So if you guys could address those, that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, that concludes public comment. We're going to move to call the business meeting to order. And Joan, roll call, please.
Director Hockert?
Here.
Director Kelsenberg?
Here.
Director Petrie?
Here.
Director Borbeni? Director Riley? Director Fatava?
Here.
Chair Sherman?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Let's do our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Next, I will make a motion to approve tonight's agenda. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay. Director Petrie, all those in favor of approving? Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
I would like to recommend that the board remove items number 12 and 13 from tonight's agenda. The closed session and the potential action item afterwards,
Great.
prior to approval.
All right, so we'll make a motion to remove the closed session and the action item. Do we need to formally make an amendment?
Prior to approval of the agenda, I'm not making the motion, but I'm suggesting you remove 12 and 13.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and I'll
second that.
modify my motion to approve tonight's agenda with getting rid of both the closed session and the action item after the closed session. And then second?
Second.
Okay, and then we'll have Director Petrie second. All those in favor of approving the agenda with the exception of the closed session and the action item after, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes and the agenda is approved. All right, we're going to move to the student reports. Welcome. And I don't know who's starting first.
I'll start.
Okay.
Okay, so a lot of seniors still have a higher workload than expected, but many are starting to get in their groove. A lot of absences as a whole, with so many people behind in classes, but in total, they are looking forward to the next social event. Juniors are excited for office hours and the ability to get help from teachers more easily, and their workload has been hard to balance, especially this week. Sophomores are excited for the upcoming break, and many have just received their pre-ACT scores back and are set with standardized testing. And again, the flu's going around, so many are falling behind. Freshmen are fully getting into the flow of high school and are beginning to get involved. Our student council freshman elections were just finalized, and many students are looking forward to break. Overall, students are excited for office hours to be implemented after break and for upcoming events like winter sports and coffee house to happen.
Sports report. The adapted soccer team ended its season with a 7-2 win over the St. Cloud Crush to capture third place in the Minnesota State High School League State Adapted Tournament hosted here at Stillwater High School. A special shout out to all the students who attended the 3 games over the weekend. Your support meant so much to the players. The girls swim and dive team placed 4th in the state meet at the U of M Aquatic Center last week. Sydney Detman was the state 200-meter freestyle swimming champion. 7 of 9 fall sports teams qualified for state competitions, and 6 of them were section champions. It was a very impressive fall season for the ponies. Winter sports are up and running. Boys swim and dive is the last to start their season, and it is Monday. Girls hockey is already 3-2 on the young season, having lost to number 2 Minnetonka and number 6 Hill Murray. Our debate team will be participating in the Classic Debate State Tournament next week. The orchestra performed 2 impressive concerts last Thursday. We are truly blessed with so much talent. For those who enjoy watching ballet, the Nutcracker will be performed this weekend in the high school's theater.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll move to our next item, which is our superintendent report.
As the students just mentioned, we have coming back again this year with a modified version of office hours at the high school. That'll be starting next week. It's a shorter window of time this year. It looks like it's about an hour after school on Wednesdays. So good opportunities for teachers to connect with their students who are struggling a little bit and try to help them get caught up. So just wanted to make everybody aware that that is going to be coming again starting next week. And then a good news story for the district, and you know, as superintendent, one of the things that I always try to emphasize is strong fiscal responsibility, and it's nice to come into a district and see this happening. So what this slide represents is the portion of property taxes for the school district. You know, we all got our county tax statements that had the county and our townships or city taxes on it, and the school district. And as you can see, because of the expanding tax base within our district, the average homeowner is going to see, if their property taxes were the same, or excuse me, their property values were same from year to year, they would see actual decrease in their property value or property taxes of 15% on the school district, and you can see a little bit different for commercial, industrial, and people who own apartment buildings. So then I had a little more research from our finance department. Let's go to the next slide. So we went back to 2020, and if you were to take a look at, all right, if the average home was like $350,000 in the district, you can see what the district's contribution or local taxpayers' contribution was in 2020. It was $1,143. You can see what it's going to be next year. It's $1,116. So taxes are actually less in 2023 than 2020 on a same property valued home. And then you can see at a $500,000 home, it was $1,646 in 2020, and it is now $1,608 in 2023. And that is with the addition of the, or passage of the operating levy and the technology capital bond last year as well. So I think that is a real good news story for our district. Now, the only caveat here is property values are going up in a lot of cases, and so, but when they go up, that, you know, taxes will with it. But if you're looking at same property values over time, we're actually slightly less as a school district, which is a good news story.
Great, thank you. Any questions? I just have, and it goes back to the students. I know the superintendent talked about office hours, and you've mentioned it now a couple times. You find those valuable, students find those valuable. Do you have anything that would maybe you would like to add to that? I mean, is it a time that you utilize yourself, or is it just catch up, or what do you see people that are using it for?
People mainly use it for like specifically if you need to like make up a test or any like missing assignments. But like me specifically, I especially use it just because it's so nice to have like one-on-one time with your teacher, especially when there's just concepts that you just don't understand. Or especially it's really nice now since everyone's sick and behind. I mean, I was literally gone out for like a week, so it's really nice to have that time built into like the schedule where you would already be at school to actually go and get the help that like you really need.
And yeah, especially for students who like have choir or orchestra or some sort of sport or activity after school, having time to come in before school or even after school to make up things or have time to meet with your teachers, it can be really difficult, or you might not have the means to be able to get to school in time or leave later. So having that availability for office hours is really nice.
Thank you. I just want to thank the staff for bringing this back. Thank you, Dr. Funk, for supporting this. I think it's something that we hear time and time again when I'm out and about, and I know with my own son that it's so valuable and appreciated that our teachers are doing that as well, so thank you. My board chair report tonight, I just want to, for the community's sake and for everyone at the table's sake, that we will be recognizing both Tina and Vivian for their service at the December 20th board meeting. Vivian has been gracious enough to agree to kind of stay on in her appointed role until the end of December. So thank you for that. And I know we had originally thought maybe we would be saying goodbye to Vivian today, but we're not. She's going to graciously stay with us. So thank you, Vivian. And we'll move that recognition to December. So just to update the board on that. Great. All right. Consent agenda is posted, or? Okay, so we have the consent agenda up, I'm assuming. And do I have a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
I'll move to approve.
Great.
Consent agenda.
Director Hockert makes the motion. Is there a second? Director Kelsenberg? Okay, all those in favor of approving tonight's consent agenda, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes. And we're going to move on to action items now this evening. First up is Oak Park Learning Center.
Good evening, Chair Sherman,
Thank you.
Superintendent Funk, members of the board. Tonight, we're here for an action item on the ALC move to the Oak Park building here. I'd like to welcome our two guests that are sitting at the last meeting, John Hunick from Kraus Anderson and Paul Aplikowski from Wold. I'm going to go through just real briefly the presentation that we had last time and just kind of highlight a few things and then open up for questions here at the end. So if you recall, last December, I believe it was December 21st, we had a meeting programmatically to look at the two programs that potentially could be moving here, the bridge transitions as well as the ALC, and staff members and administration from both the ALC and bridge transitions came here and talked about the academic benefits of moving those programs here. With us is facilities follow programming. And so at that time, there was the board to look at moving that from a programmatic standpoint. And now here, we're facility standpoint of now how can we support from a facility standpoint, how can we support that academic learning of potentially moving the ALC here to Oak Park. And there were some of the academic benefits that go with it. Now, from a construction side of things, you can see up on the screen that there's two phases. So currently, right now, we're in construction on the northern phase, which is the transition spaces that are currently under construction that will be done at the end of March, which is the top rectangle. And then the bottom one is the potential ALC space that would start next fall and then be done potentially around spring break next year of the ALC space here at Oak Park. Now, looking inside the building, the tan area is the transition space that's currently being remodeled. And then the green space is the ones for the ALC and shared spaces. So if the ALC comes, you'll notice that the kitchen and cafeteria would be upgraded as well, and we would open that kitchen up again for hot breakfast and hot lunch for our students each and every day. We would do some remodels in the gymnasium for both our students in the transitions and ALC programming, as well as opening that up at nights and weekends for our community ed students and families. And then you can see the green space here, which is the professional development room or the board room. When we get down to the pricing, there's a long-term facility and maintenance. We need to upgrade the water and the boiler in this area. So we'd be redoing the lights and ceilings, which is part of the LTFM project that was approved last summer. That would be part of this project as well, but not what we're talking about here tonight, but that's why that's highlighted in green. Now, this is exactly the ALC space kind of in concept, similarly to what we did with the bridge transitions before. Once it gets approved, our architects and construction managers would meet with the ALC administration and staff to kind of look at what it potentially could look like. Now, we had a few meetings last winter to kind of briefly talk about that. And kind of here's a drawing that is a draft that's kind of a 90% concept, and then we bring that back to them and really finalize that in the design phase, which would happen here in the winter and early spring months. And then we look at bidding this project out come summertime for a summer and fall construction period to start. Just to highlight the costs again, there will be two funding sources. The first one is our capital budget, and the second one is long-term facility maintenance. And the reason there's two is the long-term facility maintenance is replacing like for like. So you can replace carpet and ceilings and those sorts of things. When you take that down and you replace it, those are like for like dollars. The capital dollars come into when you move a wall or you reconfigure a space for a purpose that it's not used right now and you're not replacing a like for like. So this is kind of a combination of replacing some things that are currently there, but also changing the space a little bit to help benefit the students and the learning environment for our ALC students as they transition here to Oak Park. That is a $6.8 million. And then when we come to bid, if this passes tonight, we would come actually for a $9.8 million bid, including that water and boiler, which we had talked about earlier, but that was approved last summer, is upgrading the water and the boiler here for the entire building. Just for efficiencies and economy of scale, we would put that project with this one. So it would be a $9.8 million bid that we'd bring back next summer and next fall for that construction project. And then lastly, we would bid this out into two bid packages. One would be the site work, which would be the parking lot, and part of the mechanical would start next summer. And then the majority of the work in the classroom spaces and inside the building would start next fall, like I talked about, and end around spring break-ish of next year. So I know we talked in more detail at the work session here at the beginning of the month, and so at this time I'm going to open up for any questions or comments that you have for myself or any of the guests we have with us tonight.
Yes, Dr. Funk.
Just a comment for the board, and I think Mark was pretty clear that, we met with some staff members in the administration a couple times over the past year. What I can tell you is we're looking for the green light tonight to move forward with this project, and you can anticipate updates from Mark, from ALC administration and staff as we're moving along here, giving you a better idea of what things are going to look like later in the spring and into summer. And, and we can also give you updates. I think one of the questions hanging out there is when would they move in? And, at this point, we're probably saying fall of '24, but we'll see what the construction looks like. But because I know that there's operational questions as far as what things look like and things like that. But that will be forthcoming.
Great. We certainly can have questions, but I'm going to first make a motion to approve tonight's action item, and I would ask for a second, and then we can have discussion and questions. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, great. Director Petrie seconds, and now it's open for questions and conversation. Yes, Director Petrie.
I just want to go back to the why a little bit. I know that, Dr. Funk, you had mentioned earlier that it's not really an alternative learning program if it's in the high school. But I'd like you to expand on that a little bit. And just for a little bit of history, I know that the ALC used to be in separate quarters, separate buildings for much of the history that we've had it here. And I think that part of the reason why the ALC was moved to the high school was with that building project that added on to the high school. And I think it was more of a financial consideration than anything else. But I wonder if you can address the reason why ALCs are usually separate from the high school.
A lot of students who attend ALCs aren't as successful in a traditional high school environment. So it's challenging to create a alternative experience for those students when they're in the same high school with the same students going on the same spell schedule. I've seen ALCs that are afternoon ALCs. I've seen ALCs that are just morning ALCs. And when you're tying it to, here's our high school schedule, here's how we're operating, here's when lunches are at the high school, it really does not provide a alternative experience for those students. Now, having said that, you know, some of the positives that they talked about when they moved it there and were that, okay, we're going to have access to more electives. And I think if you were to talk to some of the admin team at the ALC, we don't see a lot of our kids taking those electives. And that's not to say that they can't if we move them over here. It's just, it would be a transportation, and part of the plan is a shuttle. But it's really an opportunity for them to create their own environment. And the vast majority of ALCs in Minnesota are off-site someplace. And so this is a great opportunity. And the other thing, and I mentioned it last meeting as well, they used to be with transitions previously off-site. And so we would be marrying those up again, and there's some efficiencies of staffing there that go along with that. So.
Just one clarification I wanted to make, and Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is actually a really good time to be doing this project because the boiler work and the water work have to be done.
Correct.
So that like-for-like replacement that we are doing through the long-term facility maintenance, this is a smart fiscal thing to be doing this kind of an upgrade at this time in this moment as well, right?
And the other thing that we're trying to do is do this construction project on off-peak times. So typically over the summer is when a lot of the construction happens in schools, obviously because school's not in session. And so hopefully we're trying to get a better bid market by doing this over the winter months because everything will be enclosed. And so those contractors that may not have the volume of work to hopefully get more competitive bids of doing it on off-peak time during school session versus the summer to hopefully get a better bid market for our project.
And we certainly want to create a space also that really is catered to the needs of these students, which, as you said, Dr. Funk, they're unique needs that need to be uniquely met. I know when we first saw the drawing back before Superintendent Funk even started, the drawing looked very different. Now it's come back looking a different way, and that's through collaboration with the ALC, that you had those initial conversations. So I just want to make sure that the community knows that we have the needs in mind of those students and those staff, and they are intimately a part of this process to make sure that this space is something that meets their needs. And for that, I'm grateful for everyone at the table that you're having those conversations.
Correct.
Director Kelsenberg?
Yeah, while that construction is going on, we have transitions up in the other end of the building. Would they still be doing that? You'd just be working around them?
Nope, they'll still be there. So right now, part of their construction is kind of getting the water and boiler and all set right now while they're doing their spaces. And then
Okay.
once that's done and they move into there, now we'll work on the rest of the building and do that water and boiler for the rest of the building.
And will this space that we're sitting in right now be affected, and will we
Yes.
need to move our meetings?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Great. Any other questions? Okay. With that, we'll take our vote. All those in favor of moving the ALC and according to this plan, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and Mark, you're sticking around, I think, great, for the calendar.
So the next agenda item is the calendar for the 23-24 school year, so next year. At the last board meeting, I presented the process with our committee, getting together and look at the different variables that we consider in putting together a school calendar. In your packet, you will see a revised calendar that I presented to the last board meeting. Everything is the same, but based on feedback from the conversations we had here at this table and subsequent feedback that we've had after the meeting, there is one change to the calendar that we're proposing, and that is in November. The first calendar had a professional development day on Tuesday, November 7th. And in the conversation feedback, we are proposing to move that professional development day from Tuesday, November 7th to Wednesday, November 22nd. So it's just moving it the day before Thanksgiving break. And that is the only change that is brought to you here today. Other than that, the calendar is the same that we had talked about the previous board meeting, other than that one change. So with that, I will open up to questions and comments that you may have.
Great. So just to be clear, because I know we were even talking about it with the students, that would be a no school day then for students and families on that 22nd?
Correct.
then, right?
It's a professional development day for staff only.
Staff, but
Yep.
students. Great. So we can have questions or comments, but I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve tonight's calendar.
I'll second.
And Director Hockert will second, and comments and questions.
My comment is just, I think that reflects a lot of the feedback we got in the email, so I think that's good.
I think that my personal opinion, and I know that I appreciate Dr. Funk's recognition of just kind of following how we kind of do things for the first year, so he can really kind of see and make some thoughtful recommendations. But I think that there's a lot of improvement that we can be making with our calendar, and so I think that I'm looking forward to the next calendar conversation we have and what those improvements can be. But I think this is a really good place that we netted out for this year, so. With no other comments, we can go ahead and vote on tonight's calendar. All those in favor of approving the 2023-2024 calendar, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mark. And then we are, our last item, which, Mark, that's you tonight, the policy, crisis management.
Yep. Dr. Cherry isn't able to make it tonight, so I'm stepping in her place and bringing the crisis management policy forward here to the board. From my understanding in policy committee and the previous board meetings that we've had that this was brought forward, there has not been any feedback or any questions or comments here on this policy. So with that being said, I will recommend that this policy be adopted to the board and be available for questions or comments that you may have.
Does anyone want to make a motion? I can go ahead.
I'll move to approve 806, policy 806, crisis management.
Great. And we've got a second from Director Kelsenberg. Any questions or comments? No? All right. All those in favor of approving the crisis management policy 806, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Policy passes. Thank you, Mark. Okay, next we have Caleb Drexler Booth coming up to talk about course change proposal process. I just want to make clear for the board that we are not voting on anything tonight. We're talking about the process, and any voting that takes place will occur in May. So we'll hear more from administration on that, but just to make that clear. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Sherman, directors of the board, Superintendent Funk. Happy to share some conversations that we've been engaged with this fall. As you mentioned, this will be an update, a report on curricular changes that we're going to be making at the middle school and high school course offerings. The first set of courses to take a look at are some name changes. We have 3 at the middle school and a number at the high school. The first set are social studies. You can go to the next slide. Social studies, that's okay. At the middle school, we've got at Oakland Middle School and Stillwater Middle School, they've been using different course titles for the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade social studies courses. So this is a move to align the titles of those courses with each other and with the way the standards kind of recommend. The next set are also, the first one is at the high school. It is also social studies. We are recommending to move the course that was titled Global Studies to Human Geography. If you flip back to the previous slide, the 8th grade course is titled Global Studies. And so we wanted to eliminate any confusion at the high school and clarify that it's human geography. The other component of that is there is a corollary advanced placement course called AP Human Geography. So we wanted to demonstrate the linkage between those courses. The next course up for a name change is the Career Seminar and Career Internship. This was a 2-semester course, and in order to provide a little bit more flexibility, the course stays the same, but we wanted to rename the semesters Career Seminar and Career Internship. So that allows students to take the courses in non-sequential semesters. So a student may take it in semester 1 of junior year and then perhaps senior year, 2nd semester, as opposed to consecutively. So this move doesn't change the content of the courses, changes the name and just how we structure them in the registration guide. The next course at the high school is another name change, Intro, Design, and Art. Previously, the course was titled Fundamentals of Design. This was a new course that we had recommended last year. And in the registration process, there weren't enough students registering for it for the course to run. In part of the conversation, students were a little unclear what the focus of the course was from the course title. Is it an art class? How does that fall? And so the idea was to rename the course Intro Design and Art, thinking that that may provide a clearer picture for students. So those are course name changes. We do also have a course deletion, which is the LEAP Science course at the middle school. LEAP stands for Life, Earth, and Physical Science. And this is something that I had shared with the board previously. I know last spring we had talked about it, as well as in the fall with the introduction of the 6th grade course. As you may remember, the middle school standards in science have flip-flopped. So what used to be 8th grade content in earth science flipped to 6th grade. What was 6th grade physical science flipped to 8th grade. So that was one purpose for this change. The other purpose of the change at the high school level, that 9th grade course was a physical science course. So we're not going to have a physical science course in 8th grade and then another physical science course in 9th grade. We are currently in the process of building out a course at the high school. It won't run until the current 6th graders get to 8th grade because of the sequencing. And we are just at the very earliest stages of thinking about what that course might look like at 9th grade. But we do know that it will be an environmental studies, earth science course. The high school has earth science requirements, just like middle school and elementary school. And we currently do not have a required earth science course to meet those requirements. So that will be something that will be coming, but we don't have that course built yet. So LEAP Science provided an opportunity for students to, at the 7th grade year, to essentially take 2 full years of content in 1 year. The standards have flip-flopped on us, making this course no longer relevant. The other challenge with that course is that as the standards I presented last spring have created a significant instructional shift, which requires deeper learning in the content areas. And so taking 2 years of content and trying to complete it in 1 year is also not a viable solution as we look at the new standards.
Could I ask a quick question? So for this LEAP Science, is this a required class or is this like a specialty class that certain kids?
Some students
Okay.
take the LEAP course. So the normal sequence previously was students took physical science in 6th grade, life science in 7th grade, and then earth science in 8th grade. Some students who met MCA and NWA testing requirements in math and reading were allowed into this more accelerated course where students then earned the life that would have been in 8th grade and the life that was in 7th grade and the earth that would have been in 8th grade in 1 year. Then they took what we call the STEM physical science, which earned a high school credit. Because the 9th grade course was physical science, those standards were placed in the 8th grade. So the number of students, I'd have to look to see exactly how many, but it was not a course that was available to all students.
Okay, so by taking it off, it's not going to disrupt any sequencing that we currently have in?
Correct.
Okay.
And all students who, so it would affect current 7th grade students who would already be in that course. And so this change impacts 6th grade and below.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So basically, the different changes of the first bunch of changes was just course names to align courses, and the science changes are all due to changes in the standards that we have to meet.
Exactly. So now I want to share another part of our process, which is for new courses. Typically, our timeline would put a course approval at the board level here in November. And what we found through both last year and this year is we want to change that timeline to provide a more intentional support to staff as they build out some of these courses. So the new process, I'll get to the old process in a second, but the new process that we want to focus on is in spring, requesting our staff to present new course requests to Teaching and Learning so that we can provide a conditional concept approval of those courses internally, so that we can take a look at what has been created, look at the funds that we have available to support, the time and resources to support staff in building out that course then over the summer. So that when we come to the board in November, we have more information. We do have a course request that does include a quick box for what are the core objectives of a course, a summary of how assessments will be completed, but it essentially amounts to a high-level overview summary of the course. And we want to make sure that we have all of the questions that you might ask about how these courses are constructed, what the, how they're aligned with standards, how they align with assessments, all of those components built into this process so that we can come in November for that approval, and then the new courses hit the registration guides in December or January. So that's the process we want to do. We're in this in-between area right now where we have some course requests have come in, and our response is, this looks great, but we want to make sure we can dedicate the time and resources to more fully build those out. So we provided conditional concept approval to one of the courses. We will be developing that course with staff over the spring and winter. We do want to make it available for students right now, though, to register for, so that it is a potential option for them. There's a title, there's a course description. The base content that would be in a registration guide is complete. So we'll be building that out, and then in April or May, we'll bring that fully developed course to the board for approval in the spring. Yeah.
Can I ask?
Yes.
So Caleb, help explain to the board why we are kind of out of cycle right now, because typically, from what I understand historically, we have the board approves new courses around this time of year.
Yes.
So what's different this year?
I think it's not so much what's different as opposed to this process needs to start earlier.
Okay.
So when we go out to the departments, and specifically at the high school, based on conversations with students, based on where individual courses or departments might be in curricular review cycles, we want most of these to come through that curricular review cycle, but we do have electives sometimes, and this was a good one, case in point, where we're identifying there's support for a course within the students, there's some requests to go further in their learning, and so really the conversation would have been great to have had in the spring. We didn't have it.
So I'm going to have you go back a
Yeah.
couple of slides quick. Okay, forward, hang on. Okay, go back one more slide. Yep.
I have a question about that slide too.
Okay, so conditional approval by teaching, and I'm just talking hypothetically here, all right? So somebody comes up to Teaching and Learning and you say, okay, yep, this is a good course, we want to do it, okay? So then you're moving forward with planning through the summer, comes to the board, and this is a course that does not align with the values of our district, of anything that's aligned to what the board wants to do, and the board says, thanks, but no thanks. So the question I have is, have we just encumbered a lot of staff planning and time with when the board for the first time is going to see this thing after it's been completely fleshed out?
So I would back up a step first and say the course request is made by the department, looked at by school administration, comes to teaching and learning. We take a look and say, does this meet the stated values that we have? Does it connect to the standards, even if it's elective, to the learning targets that we're looking for? We bring that course to our internal working group of Curriculum Advisory Council to review the course materials that have been presented, to give that additional vetting. We can invite the designers in for that conversation. We also present these courses at this level to the World's Best Workforce, which functions as our community district advisory council on curricular matters. So it goes through that level of conversation as well before we say, yes, we will dedicate the time and resources to build it out.
And so where I'm going with it tonight is, tonight's a good example, all right? So you got a course, you're going to say, hey, we're looking at studying this course moving forward. Okay, board's got, okay, understand what the concept of the course is. Okay, we don't have a plan, a strategic plan in place yet, but in a few months, all right, this aligns with this component of our plan. Okay, go forth and do good things. My concern is, at some point, whether it's through an update to the board on a weekly basis that we do, or it's at a study session, hey, board, kind of like we're doing tonight. Here's something we're looking at planning, so that I don't want to get us stuck in a situation where suddenly we're behind the 8 ball and we present a course that doesn't look like it's going to fly, and we put a lot of work into it. So that's my comment on it.
Director Vodova, you have a question?
Well, there's two of these, I'm a little confused. So there's this slide, and then there's the new course approval process for 2022, 2023. And they're different.
Yeah.
Is this the one we want to end up with then?
This, nope.
No?
Go back
This-
one slide.
yeah,
That
that's
is, that
one we
is
want-
the timeline that we want to implement.
That's where
Where
they want
courses,
in the future.
In the
that's-
future, because
correct.
right now we're doing the other one, which the other one seems like we had the students register before we even approved the course, which
That
seems
is-
a little bizarre to me.
that is a nuance of our current timeline.
Okay.
Typically, in previous years, you would be approving this summary page, and then it would go into the registration guide, and then we would build out the courses over the summer. So it's a very similar process. We're just looking to move one piece up into the spring so that we can more deeply vet those courses and more fully build them out.
Director Kelsenberg?
A new course, and sometime I wonder, is it a new course or just a significant change to a current course? Where's that germinated? Just from the teachers that are currently at the school teaching it? Or is there pressure coming from state or parents or whatever to germinate a course?
So in the course of science, so we did introduce a new course last year, the 6th grade science. That was directly at the behest of the standards, right? The standards flip-flopped, we needed to adjust. Same thing with LEAP. Most often at the high school, courses go through the departments where they're identifying what are the various electives that we're offering with the Pathways program, how can we clarify what the content and curricular objectives are, or what are the additional opportunities that we can provide for kids. So again, most often electives come through the high school. There's just more room in the student schedule to take a variety of courses. And so as we do that, and refine and listen to where the students are at, we want to make sure that we provide course offerings that meet what they're interested in.
Other questions? Yes, Director Petrie?
So piggybacking on Director Kelsenberg's question, is that where this new class came from, the one on, what was it?
Cultural and Ethnic Studies.
Yes, Ethnic and
2.
Cultural Studies 2. I can see where that would be like a continuation. If you had a one-semester class, then, could you finish out the year and dive deeper into that subject? And is that kind of how that came about?
Yeah, so this was a new, Ethnic and Cultural Studies 1 was a new course last year. I believe we had one section that ran last year. This year we have 2 sections. So the interest increased, and as part of that conversation between the teacher and students was there was interest in going deeper into some of that work. And so this would present a second semester with Ethnic and Cultural Studies 1 being a prerequisite. And there's we can talk more in the spring with the details of it, but there's a deeper emphasis on student inquiry and student projects within that work.
Yes.
I'm trying to picture what to expect in this new system of what we're actually going to be seeing at the board level. What kind of level of detail or high level version of these courses? You kind of mentioned like it'll talk about maybe how it fits into the scope and how it addresses standards. All of that will be the high level, but will the rest of the course be built out before it comes to us? I kind of going back to Dr. Funk's comment as well in terms of preserving staff time before it gets full board approval. Like what will we actually be seeing then?
Yep. So so right now, like I said, there is I didn't put it in the board packet, but essentially it's a one-page, it could spill over into a second with what are the core concepts and skills, what's just a high-level instruction and assessment, and a few other questions about the staffing implication or the cost to build it out, the materials. And they tend to be very general and rough. And so we want to make sure that we can go through that process and vet those out. So what the products might be, we'll be developing what that next level of approval process looks like. It certainly isn't going to be ready to now implement, right? There's going to be more work as we engage in that. But it will be certainly much more than what we've presented in years past.
Kind of a follow-up with that. Would that then include like the core instructional resources, but not necessarily the supplemental?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like the textbooks, would you have a textbook chosen by that point or maybe not?
Depends on the course, and depends on the focus of it. Some courses, are less dependent on a core text that every single student reads versus here's the main themes that we're going to uncover and a deeper appreciation for student inquiry and student projects in those bigger, broader ideas. So depends on the course, but I would say a core resource would be a component that we would bring as part of the process.
And probably especially for electives, there isn't always going to be a textbook.
Right,
I mean, I would imagine we have 100 electives at the high school that I doubt there's that for.
We won't be bringing daily lesson plans and that level of detail, but a deeper look at what is the semester at a glance, what are the units of instruction that we're looking at within it. Still room to continue building those out.
So I would say too, if the board has certain desires that they want included or considered for inclusion, to forward those to the superintendent for consideration. I don't know. I mean, if we are approving it in May, we want to make sure we have what we need to make that approval or not. Director Vodova?
So I was just wondering, there's a conditional concept approved by Teaching and Learning in April, and then in the summer someone is developing course materials, which I assume is some teachers or like a focus group of teachers. So what fund or who's paying, like, are the is it like training dollars? Is it teaching and learning dollars that pay for that? Like, where is that money coming from to develop the course materials?
That's part of our operating budgets within teaching and learning.
So teaching and learning, okay.
And that's again why we want those courses to come in so that we have time to look to say we can dedicate this number of hours to curriculum writing time or this amount for materials to come in to vet through some of that work.
And that's already in your budget?
Yes.
And again, I think what's important for from my perspective is, all right, how does this course fit into these different areas of focus for us as a school board? How does it align with where we're going with some of our initiatives? We have to make sure it's aligned with some of the 600 series policies that we're going to be talking about here in a little bit. And, he could give you a lot of information, but it's, okay, how does this impact, diversity of thought with our students, if that's one of the strands that we're looking at the board level here, or areas of emphasis, or whatever else it may be. So that's kind of the lens that I see through this adoption process.
And so I guess my question as a board member who, we delegate a lot of our authority to you.
Right.
Do you support this in concept?
Again, it's not like we're operating in a vacuum here. So what's going to happen is, it's going to come up through teaching and learning. Okay, we want to do this. Caleb and I meet every week, and okay, Mike, this is what's coming up. And if I see that, okay, wait a minute, this thing could be pretty controversial, I could probably flag that right away and say, we need to get this in front of the board to do a quick review in a study session of some sort before we go full barrel into this. So it's not like we're going to not have checks in place
Right.
To make sure.
So you've seen this concept already. You support this concept that's being. I know we're not voting on anything. We have nothing to do with it at this point, but you're on board and support it.
If I'm taking a fresh set of eyes looking at this, and I were looking at this strictly as a board member, all right, and the issue, my concern would be, okay, teaching and learning is presenting the conditional approval. Okay, how does this fit in with our community as a whole? And so, but what I'm presenting to you is we can make this happen and make sure that the board remains informed on what's happening so that we can move forward and have a successful presentation in November.
And the cultural and ethnic studies too, you support that in concept. That's been vetted by your whole team. So you've done what is going to be done in April. You've done that, and you're just kind of letting us know. We've done that April work in November this year for a final approval in May. This is the only year that we'll be having, we're kind of seeing it like this.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm clear. But next time, it may or may not come to the board in concept, because sometimes it may, if it gets flagged. If it doesn't, we might not see it until November, the following, next year. Any other questions? And I would imagine some of this is going to be driven by our upcoming strategic planning process, what the community wants, what our value and our vision, and how that changes.
And not just new courses, but back to the point on, and I think this has probably been stated, but standards change. And the standards change with different, and he's renaming some courses here, but courses will adjust year to year based upon the standards that we receive from the state of Minnesota.
Great. Well, thank you for this report, and we will see you in May-ish.
For sure.
Great. Thank you.
Not sooner.
All right. Oh, yeah, you're not going anywhere. This was a lot. We'll move on to our next report, the 600 series. So I will turn it over to others.
Actually, if it would be all right, I
Yes,
would like to
go ahead.
give Caleb a breather for a second and do a quick little, get everybody up to speed on the work that's been happening for almost a year now on this 600 series. So the 600 series is part of this year's board goals that we set, and it has been in the works for a very long time. We, in committee, first heard about it last spring. The actual work on the policies was done by about this summer, and then we have been having conversations about it. Dr. Funk has been getting up to speed on these policies as well, and there's just a lot of information going in and a lot of work going into these policies. So I wanted to kind of brief everybody on kind of how these policies are different than ones that you have maybe seen in other series. If you've gotten a chance to look through them, they're pretty dense. And this was intentional by our staff to integrate both the model policies and current Stillwater policies and procedures as well. So these are really a hybrid of multiple different policies, procedures, and it really was intentional work done by the World's Best Workforce Committee as well as staff to make sure that we're bringing the community along with how things are done in Stillwater. So it's not necessarily a major change on how we do things, but really creating more transparency through policy work for the board to better understand and for the community to understand a little bit better. And you may be wondering, it's November, right on a holiday week. This work has been going on for a long time, and we wanted to make sure that our current board, before we turn over in January, gets a chance to really take a look at this work. And this work was also done by last year's World's Best Workforce Committee. So I know this is kind of sliding in at the last minute, but we're really hoping to get some good feedback from the board and then continue these conversations and moving it forward. So tonight, we're going to have Dr. Drexler Booth give us a little more of an extended intro to frame out these policies and explain in a little more depth kind of where they all came from and kind of get us up to speed on the policies. And if you do have questions that go into really detail, I'm happy to meet with you guys and get everybody's feedback in whatever form it takes, whether it comes out tonight or at a later date to bring back to policy and then integrate it into these policies, because it's a lot. But with that, I'll turn it over to Caleb.
Very good. Thank you for the introduction. You speak the truth when you say there was a lot of work, a lot of eyes on these. We brought them to teaching and learning, to that curriculum advisory group I mentioned before, as well as the World's Best Workforce over multiple months. So digging into our current policies, looking at the MSB model policies, looking at the various contexts within Stillwater that says, how do we make this reflect what our current practices are? And so if we take a step back and think about your work, I think at one of my first board meetings last year, there was conversation at this table about what's our goal, what's our board goal, and one of them was to look at the policies concerning achievement and how they are aligned to best practices. And so part of that goal was to review and update the 600 series. So I'm pleased to finally be here at the table to talk about that. I think one of the things to highlight as we dig into this is it's a lot of the work is connected very strongly to the World's Best Workforce legislation. That said, a lot of the structures that are part of our new revised policies were in existence prior to World's Best Workforce legislation. But you will see the goals, you will see the committee that's referenced that is in a direct response to World's Best Workforce, as well as practices inherent to the district. So I also want to just bring it back to statute. So as you're familiar with your duties, this is the statute that outlines the duties of the board to adopt rules for instruction, to prescribe textbooks and courses of study, among other things. But that's the subdivision that really isolates the duties of the board. We use policies to help flesh out how that actually happens, how it occurs, how a school district of 8,000 students with over 550 teachers engage in the process of meeting students' learning needs on a daily basis. So the policies then help direct our work within teaching and learning and across the system. The first thing I want to highlight is the term curriculum. I sometimes cringe when I hear the word curriculum because it has a different meaning, a different definition depending on who's using it. So the statute does provide a definition. The district or school adopted programs, written plans for providing students with learning experiences that lead to expected knowledge and skills in career and college readiness. That's pretty clear. In common vernacular, curriculum often means learning materials, a textbook. We know it's not, a textbook is not the curriculum. And we go over that over and over with our committees. The end of our review cycle isn't a new textbook. It's the development of a framework for instruction. Similarly, curriculum is not a set of standards or learning targets that live in isolation. So curriculum, when I think of curriculum, and I use it in a broad sense, it is this dynamic interplay of the mission of this district and departments with the standards, with the learning resources, with the instructional tools and frameworks that staff utilize, with assessment, all contextualized and integrated by the student experience. So it's much more nuanced than simply a textbook or even the written plans. But I think that provides the deliverable of what we're looking for when we say curriculum. So the 600 policies provide a nested framework for understanding the work of curriculum, broad definition, in the district. So policy 601 presents the academic and achievement plan. Within 601, you'll see language referencing the world's best workforce and some of those legislative components. 603 looks at the evaluation and instructional review process that we go through. 604 sets out here is the instructional curriculum, the courses, the course of study, the offerings that are available to students as well as the requirements for graduation. And then finally, 606 presents the process by which we select materials and review those resources. So policy 601, like I said, it provides that academic achievement plan. One of the things to highlight in 601 is as the committees were taking a look at this work, we wanted to align it with who we are as Stillwater. And so within that, you'll see a portrait of the graduate as part of the policy that sets forth the academic achievement plan. It does include quite a bit of the Minnesota, the model policy from MSBA as well. But it does establish the broad parameters under which we operate in curriculum work. So with that, I think
Sure, we can.
a conversation on 601.
We can, take a look at 601 while we're on it right now. And see if you guys have any feedback for us if you've gotten a chance to look through it. So the one thing that, as Caleb mentioned, we really did integrate the, section, what is that, 4B, kind of targets that strategic plan. It's on the third page, if you want to scroll down. There we go, the communicator, collaborator, critical thinker part. So that's what the profile of graduate, is integrated into that particular part.
Can I ask a question that just backs up even further
Sure.
a little bit? Because I'm kind of coming in new to what you guys have probably been talking about for a long time. I started out at the MSBA model policy page. They've got a lot of 600 series policies. How did we take all of those model policies and select just 4 in the 600 series? Was there a reason as to why we don't just whole scale adopt an entire series that MSBA has as a model policy, or are we picking and choosing what's relevant, I guess, for our district? Yeah.
I'm coming in late on this, but I can tell you 2 things that I look at. I look at A, what are the mandated policies from MSBA? What are must-haves? Okay. And then B, and Caleb and Director Hawker here, you can help me, or Director Petrie as well. What are we looking at as far as our current policies? So we've got the mandated policies out there. We've got our current ones in existence, and then how do we mesh them? So that's what my take on it is.
And I think my understanding is why we targeted these 4. The big one that really had the most amount of work was 606. And that was something that previous conversations on a board that we were not part of, that there was some discussion and a little bit of confusion between staff and board expectations. So that was already flagged before we even started working on this, as we really need to dig into 606 so that we can clarify for the district, for staff, on how to do that curriculum selection process, and then building it back a little bit. These are the other policies that kind of set that work up. That's kind of my understanding. And then not all of these fall under I think 2 of them are under the required policies, but I believe that 606 was really the impetus of the one we needed the most work on. And just to give you some context, these policies have not been updated in a while. So
I remember when we were establishing that as a goal. They hadn't
yeah,
been looked at
like
in a long time.
early 2000s and 80s. So.
And that was just a more broad
Yep.
conversation. Like, I just was looking at the model policies from MSBA and noticed they have a library of them. And some
Yes.
seem rather, small in nature and, really specific. So I didn't know the rhyme or reason, so thank you for that.
Sure. Do you have a question?
Did you want any input on some, like,
If you've
okay, so
got
like when I just,
feedback, yeah.
even just when I read through this, okay, most of it looks pretty good, but for letter C, the first sentence seems like it belongs either in A or B and not in C. So, like, you have communicator, okay, that makes sense. You have collaborator, and that makes sense. Critical thinker, the first sentence is shows empathy for others, which seems to be, that should probably be either in the collaborator or the communicator, not in the critical thinker, which should just start with can solve complex problems and able to discern accurate and relevant information.
We can certainly take a look at it.
I think that the reason why that is like that is that this is essentially our existing strategic plan. And where we probably would not, I wouldn't certainly advocate that we make changes to that strategic plan in the, within this one particular policy. We're just sort of including that as a framework, if you will, for.
I thought this is the policy you're writing.
This is the policy.
It is
So-
the policy,
Yep.
but it's incorporating, if you want to go, we probably can't go back a slide, but did you remember seeing that, the head with those 4
Things in it?
Uh,
Yeah, but
so
that's what I'm just
that's
saying, that
essentially-
sentence doesn't fit with letter C. It just doesn't belong there.
Well, and my question too, I guess, on that section was just, once we go through this strategic planning process, that might look completely different or be gone, so.
And actually,
Right.
critical thinker isn't even in the little symbols in there. The little, if you go back to your picture, your symbols. There's collaborator, and that's creative, that's not critical thinker. That's creative thinker. That's different than critical thinking, right? It is different. It's completely different, right? So you don't even have your critical thinker in there.
We can take a look at that.
So it should just pick up the language then from the.
Yeah, that's good feedback, yep.
For some reason, there's an error on this, and I'm looking back at what's on our website, and it does say critical thinker. I don't know why this one says creative thinker. I apologize.
Okay.
for that.
I was going to say, I thought that.
Okay.
Okay.
This is just a kind of side note on this. Integrating to this level of detail in the policy is something that staff was very much recommending, but also we wanted feedback from the board. Is this something that we feel comfortable with? Because when we do it, like update our strategic plan, we'll need to go back and
Right.
update this potentially as
Yep,
well.
absolutely.
So is that something that we would like to see in our policy? Is this level of detail spelling out our strategic plan, or do we need to pull this back? Just interested in thoughts from the board on that one.
I don't love, me personally, I don't love policy that dates itself. I like it to keep it kind of timeless, and then the procedures can be the specific, but that's just me.
Dr. Drexler Booth, did you have a comment?
My only comment is whether it lives in the policy or somewhere else, these would help inform the ways in which we evaluate courses that come forward, or materials, or instructional frameworks. So do they adhere, do they create students who are collaborative and critical and creative thinkers. Putting it in policy or not, that's certainly a conversation here at this table, but from an operational standpoint, we want to make sure that our courses and materials align with the values of the district as expressed through policy and mission and other places.
And I'm going to say right off the bat, because this is informal, so we can all kind of talk. This was a lot, and I am not ready to say that this is all of my feedback, so this is just some. And I tried to kind of keep it broad, but one thing I noticed on item C under the measures, multiple performance measures, we have student performance on the MCA. I didn't know, we talk about that we have a lot of different measures of performance. And I just feel like, should we go beyond the MCA as being the main measure? Should we be including other performance measures? I know we have FastBridge, or we have, in high school, we have something completely different, but that was just one piece of feedback.
Thank you.
The other piece of feedback I have was the name of the policy.
Okay.
And I haven't thought of a suggestion. And because I was just kind of busily trying to read through them all, but I read this policy and I didn't immediately get academic achievement plan. I don't know what it would be, but I just thought the title.
Do you know what the model policy is called?
School district curriculum.
School district curriculum and instructional goals, which is probably a little bit, it's not, it's long and it's not, flashy, but it's a little bit maybe more descriptive, but because it does incorporate the goals of the strategic plan, it made more sense to me from what I was reading.
Okay.
Just a question. This seems very focused on high school, not like there's no elementary stuff in. There's nothing that says we need to be able to get the kids reading and.
That comes up in another policy. That does come up in another policy. This is really a much higher level, like the big circle, like Caleb just showed us.
There's a lot of it's career,
Right.
You're going to be ready. And I'm
Yes.
thinking, what about our third graders,
And
that doesn't really apply to them.
That language is coming straight out of the World's Best Workforce Law. A lot of this policy is very much framed out from that, and it does talk about career readiness and specific in the World's Best Workforce. I think that the definition of it and the goals, under, 3D in the definitions, it does talk about kind of all students and even calls out third graders achieve grade level literacy. So there's pieces of the elementary in it where it kind of is reflected in the law, but this is the big one for the whole district. Other thoughts on 603, 602?
601.
601. Which one are we on? Shoot, sorry guys. And you also, tonight's not the end all be all. We have 3 readings on this.
Right.
So
I should say for the community getting this on
Yes.
Friday and with the holiday, it's I do
Tuesday.
need more time. Yeah, right. And it's a Tuesday, not a Thursday, so I do need more time, but
Right.
getting the packet, I guess, on Friday.
Oh, got it. That's great.
But I think what I was trying to do, and I don't know how you recommend reading this, but I think where I got hung up was I was looking at the model policies. And we didn't include a lot in the model policy, but maybe you were giving me the tip of, maybe I don't look at the model policies. Maybe I'm getting too hung up in reviewing the models, and I was like, oh, why didn't we include that? Or what was the conversation around not including that? So I may just go back and read ours as they stand, like you said, next to each other, and not get so bogged down in the model policies. That was my feedback, I guess, reading it.
Cool. Should we move on to
Yes.
603 this time? Are we getting to 603?
Yeah, so for each of the slides, we had an introduction. So if you're okay, we can either continue with the slides, or I can just speak through the slide. There's not a lot of information on them.
Maybe when we get to 606.
Yeah.
There's
Oh, yes, there is more in
slides
606.
For 606, but.
So with 603 is the evaluation of the instructional program. So the purpose of this policy is to provide that direction for continuous review and improvement. I had spoken to this at our previous presentation as well regarding student achievement and how we respond to the data. So this outlines the process that we use to review and utilizing the various committees. Again, you'll find some MSBA language in here, along with district-specific content as well.
One thing you may notice, not to confuse anybody, but at the top there's 604, 603. They just got backwards numbered when we went back 2 years ago and numbered everything. So we figured that out in committee, and that's why that's crossed out. So we now have them better aligned with the model policies so that when future committees come through and look at the model policies, they're at least closer aligned.
I had a couple comments. I don't know. This is
Sure,
one
go for it.
I just happened to read. I thought maybe a better definition in item 2 on what regularly is in policy. I guess I'm trying to get as specific as regularly. It's open for an interpretation. So is it annually? Is it every 2 years? Is it at a certain time that coordinates with World's Best Workforce or the CAC? I don't know. That stuck out at me. And then I had down in the item B, responsibility, B. And I don't know, I'm not as familiar with how World's Best Workforce and the CAC in terms of size and operation, but do we need to get any more detailed into what's the size of the committee? How often do they meet? Is that something that would be more procedural or, okay.
As a policy, you don't want to get into that level.
Okay, and that's kind of what I was thinking on that. Under item B2, I guess I thought, because I'm always thinking of budgets and cost, I just didn't know if in those 8 things, the following shall be addressed, if we could maybe, the cost associated could be addressed with the school board or something related to cost. And I didn't read through, like I said, I think I got to read through these all the way you've written them together back to back, and it might be included in somewhere else and I didn't review it.
Well, there's our literacy part, number 6. Yeah.
It's in there.
And then going back to item 2, further would lead to recommendations for modifications of practice. Is that recommendations to the school board? Is that to anyone in specific? I didn't know. Recommendations to who? I guess I just didn't. To the superintendent, to I guess I was just reading and I said, well, okay, who lead the recommendations?
Just to clarify.
Yeah, just to clarify. But I mean,
Seems like for number 2, there would also be a statement in there, regularly evaluate the educational programs as a mean to improve opportunities for students and meet state standards or whatever, right? I mean, because that's actually what really drove a lot of what you were doing earlier this meeting, right? Is the standards change, so then you have to review the curriculum and fix stuff, right? Maybe that's in another policy.
And I would say, Alice, what you were saying, it's a kind of like what we were talking about earlier, all right? We may need to modify something. It'll be a conversation with me, which very well could lead to a conversation with the board.
right.
So I think it's okay, just not identifying.
Not to identify.
Who, yeah.
Any other thoughts on this
One thought here.
Yeah, Pete, go ahead.
You mentioned state standards, so you advise things to meet state standards. Then it comes together, does it have to go back to state for some kind of approval then?
No.
You decide that you're meeting the standards? Okay,
And then we're evaluated by tests and things that we,
okay.
yep.
This is similar to my other comment, and this is just to be for clarity purposes. But vague language in policies sometimes I'd like to be as clear and as specific as possible. So in item F on the second page, it was kind of periodically. Again, it was like regularly. What does periodically mean? What does regularly mean?
It means not annual.
Yeah, and I think, but I mean, I would think that just to have some kind of conversation so expectations are, And maybe that can come in procedure. I don't expect it to be annual or driven by,
What you could do as a board, and once you get caught up, and really this would be under the purview of the policy committee, is take a look at your policies, top to bottom. Okay, which policies have to be reviewed annually? Put them over here. All right, what policies should we put in a 2 or 3 year, regular or periodic rotation? Put those here. And then these are really just solid core ones that, all right, maybe every 4 years we take a look at. That's, once we get up to speed on everything, that's what I would recommend that you do.
But like this, when you say like, faculty and administration shall regularly evaluate the educational program, right?
Yes.
In a way, I would think each department should be doing that, like annually, like saying
I-
like, okay,
I would-
everyone went to summer training or whatever.
Yeah,
What do we need to do?
I would say we're doing it weekly.
right.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
really are. We
yeah,
have
they're
professional.
not like not doing it for
Right,
5
we
years.
are,
I don't know.
professional learning communities are looking at what we're teaching, what assessments we're using, and what are the results of that. So at a real micro level, that's what we're doing.
And for me, I think the language is, to me, regularly, periodically. I would just like to say, you could take that word out. Will evaluate. To me, a policy is, or will, or ongoing, like Vivian said, or, because to me, I think we're doing it more than what it would be regular. I guess I'm just looking to, that was just a comment. I had to take out some of that language, but, and I do have notes on here, but to be honest, I think I didn't get to the full series. And I just don't want to make comments that I'm going to be catching at a further read later on, so I'll save some of these. But I think what I'm looking for too is more broadly, what I care about our curriculum is that both the community and the board have representation in the process. So I think through the Curriculum Advisory Committee, World's Best Workforce, we are accomplishing that. I think broadly, we just want to know that there's community voice, there's board approval and process and voice involved in there as well. And I'm seeing definitely more of that in what I read so far than I have what was out there previously. So that was the step in the right direction. That was just a general comment.
Is there a way that people in the community find out how to get on the curriculum committee or whatever, curriculum development? It just seems like, okay, we have this, I guess, curriculum development committee, and it's kind of made up of people who are already like if you want to bring in different voices, you're going to have to reach those voices somehow.
I believe there is online, there is, it's a little outside of policy discussion, but I believe there is information on how to kind of contact someone. I'm not positive. There used to be. I'd have to go back and look. There is. Okay. So people can find that information online and then, but also I know that there probably is a process where you're identifying people of different backgrounds and needs. I know that gets off of this, but World's Best Workforce mandates certain representation, right, of.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, just to answer that quickly, we do work with buildings to ensure that we have a parent from every building who's identified to serve on the committee. We have a teacher as well from every building to serve on that committee. There are community members as well.
And I think my last comment too, and I know this gets to be, I'll just say it. We are not educators as a board. We do manage and approve things, but we delegate our authority to the superintendent. And so I think as clear as I would like to see that, and I didn't get a real, maybe it's in here and I just haven't gotten to it yet, but I think it's important for the community also to understand that.
It says right there, responsibility.
Does it? Okay.
It's in here.
It is. Which one is that in?
B, 3A, the superintendent shall be responsible.
Okay. Am I in the wrong policy?
Yep, no, I'm 604 now.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's in 603.
The numbering is weird because it's,
Yeah.
okay, so we're on 603 in the blue.
Yep.
Okay,
Blue 603.
perfect.
3A.
Thank you. I'm on the right one now. Thank you. Yes. Great.
All right.
604?
604. 604 deals with the instructional curriculum. So the purpose of 604 is to provide the pre-K-12 course offerings that are aligned to standards and to state graduation requirements. So this lays out the kinds of courses, the subject areas that need to be taught, and delineates, what we should be including as part of our overall curricular programming.
And Director Vodova, this really goes into much more detail on the curriculum requirements as well for the whole district.
Sorry, I'm kind of out on 604 again.
That's
I haven't
okay.
read it yet.
There is one thing that I would like to run
Yes.
by the rest of you guys. One thing that I noticed that was not added into this policy, but it was in the model policy, was a section that talks about, it says, help identify collaborative partnerships among pre-K through grade 12 schools, post-secondary institutions, economic development agencies, and local and regional employers that support student transitions in post-secondary education and employment, and provide students with applied and experiential learning opportunities. That's wording from the model policy that didn't necessarily make it into this policy, that had much more of a community focus and employment.
Tell me which one that was again.
It's in, I'm reading from the model policy.
and I have
It's-
that
Oh,
here.
okay, it's number 5A8. Not that that was in your packet. So it's not in our policy. This is just something that, when I was reading through it, I just noticed that this was not included. But I'm curious if that would be something of interest from other board members to add that back in, or are we happy with kind of what is already in there? And if you haven't familiarized yourself with this section, you can certainly get back to me on
Like some of that
too.
could be in I right there. What you were just talking about. I mean, you could add some of it to I.
True.
right?
Yep. And I does talk about a little bit of that as well, the career and college interests, and maybe it is
You mean you
redundant.
could add a little more meat into it and get some of that stuff in there?
Sure. Hang on.
604 now.
Yep, here's 604 now.
This? Yes, okay. I'll take a look at that.
Okay.
I also noticed, did they mention in the model policy a lot about the civics test? Is there a background on that? Like, I guess we took it out, I didn't know why or what.
That is an assessment that is required to be given.
It is required.
I think so.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's helpful if you point out two areas that you're interested in us.
Sure.
I appreciate that because. Sorry, again, 604 and 606 I didn't get to, so.
That's okay. Any other thoughts on 604 before we move back to 606? And for this one, we'll probably need to see the slides again, because I know there's more of an intro.
So 606 is the one that Director Hockert, as you mentioned, kind of there was a lot of conversation around earlier. And so we wanted to take a look at what we currently had in policy, but also what we have in procedures. So this policy is a little bit different than in how we've addressed policies previously. It was pretty much a strike all of what had been listed because there was reference to procedure components within the policy as headers. And as we were making some changes, realized let's rethink how we're taking a look at this policy. So it was a strike all. We maintained some of the policy language. We also included language from policy 606.2, which was a two-sentence policy referencing we put it into the general statement of policy. A lot focusing on student. I'm trying to find it here. 602 was academic risk, I believe.
Sanctioned risk.
Sanctioned risk.
Yep. And it's the second under number 2 in the actual policy. The actual wording is in that middle paragraph.
Thank you. So that was a policy that, again, in looking at the historical Stillwater, wanting to make sure that we, in our policy, could reference back to some of those conversations. So 606.2 is built into 606, so later on, when we do our third and final reading, we will also be recommending to revoke 606.2. I would say the other piece of this policy, you'll see a blend of MSBA. You'll see also procedural components that we put into policy as well. For the most part, those were criteria by which we look at materials, the values that we're looking at. So again, putting those into the policy language gives further direction to what we're looking for at a policy level. There was the final component really codifies the process for addressing materials when they get challenged in a formal review or a formal challenge. So instead of creating a standalone procedure, we put that step-by-step piece into the policy as well. There were a couple other changes that I want to highlight, or things that we included that you won't find in the model policy. There was this consideration of core instructional resources versus supporting instructional resources, recognizing that as we go through our formal curricular review cycle, which may turn into a core textbook adoption, that is part of our process, and that is governed by this policy. This policy, though, also needs to govern the materials that a teacher might choose on a daily basis based on current events, based on student interests, student passions, to be able to help align the learning of the core instructional program, what we would expect from all courses, as well as those components that are more nuanced in the moment for staff. So this policy really needs to address both those components. And so the way we're doing that is with the inclusion of core instructional resources and supporting instructional resources. So the core follow that long-range curriculum development process, as well as the ongoing continuous improvement. It represents the standard instruction that all students receive in that course. We go through the advisory committees, World's Best Workforce, as well as our internal group to look at those and vet those resources. And we do follow board policy on purchases over board spending limits. Supporting instructional resources are those resources which teachers may select to increase the effectiveness of the curricular objectives and the core resources. So teachers do have the responsibility to use good judgment, to review any material that they think might be needing some additional conversation might be controversial, consult with the building principal to determine what the appropriate course of action might be, including parent notification. All of this is spelled out in the policy, but I wanted to highlight specifically there is treatment of the core instructional resources as well as the supporting,
So-
especially
Go ahead.
especially when you look at how the previous procedures were written. A lot of that language we use to understand supporting instructional resources, not the core. The core needs to follow formal process with multiple committees, with multiple eyes looking at it and through the board.
So question, so if I'm a parent and we have a core resource and I don't approve of it for my student or my son or daughter, what are my options under this policy?
So core or supporting, a parent who has an objection to the materials is able to engage in conversation with the teacher about alternative learning experiences. There is a process as well if they say if that doesn't meet their needs, to meet with the principal on that process, as well as to remove it from the curriculum.
Right,
There is
but-
a
but if
formal
I-
process.
Yeah, I'm not talking about removal from the
Right.
curriculum, but if I have, I can remember Huck Finn when I was in school, all right, it was, controversial. Okay, well, I don't want my son or daughter reading that book. So there are alternatives available,
Exactly.
regardless of the resource.
Yep.
Yes.
Let's, for example, you have a teacher at the high school, they have a new bit of material. Does it follow the chain of command? Do they have to sell their principal on the idea first, who then comes to your department, or?
For the
They
supplemental?
just have to do it if they're in doubt.
No, I'm not talking just right in here, but when
Yeah.
you have, we're talking, new material, core instructional resources, a new textbook,
Yeah,
whatever.
there's a process.
In order to make the purchase, there needs to be approvals at various levels for that.
But even the approval for the material, is, I guess, the purchase follows the approval, right? And then,
So I'll give you an example. I met with a media specialist a few weeks ago in the elementary. And part of the conversation was, okay, we want to have a process that we follow for, because, I think that there's, books are a hot topic in the political world right now. And so we discuss through teaching and learning what our process is for adoption of library books. And so that's usually pretty simple, but in today's world, we got to have a really, I think, good vetting of the materials. And they're appreciative of that because they're not just making the decisions on their own. So it's part of what we're doing.
I don't want to interrupt this, but when I was looking at the policy, I was really paying specific attention to 5C and kind of just making sure that all those criterias looked okay, like the age appropriateness. So just to be clear, this is the other instructional materials. This is not like standard curriculum, or is this for everything?
This references all materials should meet these core values.
Okay. So I guess a couple ideas I just wanted to kind of throw out there to the board would be, and this is more, I think, in the supplemental materials that can happen at a classroom level, but strive to be free from bias, something like that. Something about where, I guess I want to be really sensitive, and what I hear in the community and from parents is we want to teach our students how to think, not what to think. And so just kind of selecting materials that present both sides, or that, I mean, it depends on the class, right? Or just removing that kind of an implied bias that might be present. I don't know, just throwing that out there. I see that sometimes. And then I thought going back to language to our strategic plan, which again could change, but materials that stimulate creative thinking, I mean, it can be as much as small as that. I don't know, I guess I just thought going back to our strategic plan and looking at those portraits and how do those get adapted in here. But I think for me, I think that is a parental concern, that on the bias side. I don't know. I mean, I'm certainly open to hearing everyone's thoughts on adding something like that.
I think the bias piece, you can teach, you can use some material and you can teach with it and you can teach the fact that this is biased.
Everything's biased, and you should,
Yeah.
that's part of critical thinking. It's
Yeah.
to read something and say,
Right.
what does this writer want you to think?
Right, and
What
so-
does this writer want you to
Right.
think?
And maybe it's as simple as saying the critical thinking piece, but and we could phrase it that way. I had two phrases where it's like stimulate creative or critical thinking, and then I had, or like strive to be free from bias, or teach something that I guess I'm just trying to say, I think that there are a lot of families out there that want to know their teachers are teaching them how to think,
Right.
not what to think. Identifying what might be biased and why. Identifying, think critically, not think what I think or what someone else thinks. What do you think? And so to present all sides from that.
So are you looking at number 7 right there?
C7, yeah.
Oop,
No,
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 Yeah,
no,
that was
no,
fine.
it was
Go
just
back.
right there.
Oh, yeah, it could be there.
Right
Or-
there, right there.
Right. it could
Potential
be-
bias.
In a manner
Or-
that enables.
Or the critic, I
students-
guess I'm just looking at how, and maybe bias is kind of the wrong word, because I agree with you, Dr. Funk. I mean, you want to be able to teach, maybe you're teaching a lesson, like, why does this appear biased? You don't want to, but I guess it's that,
Are you
portrait
look-
of a graduate is always talking about that critical thinking, but maybe
Are
that's.
you looking for like, that would take a balanced approach?
Oh, number
where-
4 does.
Where we would have both sides of a perspective.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I haven't read this, but I want to be considerate of
Yeah.
what families are feeling like. And it truly is, don't teach my kid what to think, teach them how to think. And I don't know, maybe that is all, I'll read this, and like I said, I didn't read this over with a fine tooth comb, but I want to make sure we capture that in, and if you're using the same supplemental materials all the time, does that go through an approval process? So for example, like if teachers are, and again, it may be in here, and I'm just kind of, is there a point where if you're using supplemental materials, but you're using them on the regular, that you're going through principal and staff for approvals? And is that addressed in here at all? Do we need to address that in there?
The whole point is supplemental is not part of your core.
Right.
Right, but I'm talking about if it's used regularly.
But as a teacher, you're always going to have supplemental materials that you're going to use regularly because you start, you gather your materials, and the ones that are effective with your students, you're going to use more again, and you'll look for other ones probably too.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be like, you can't expect a teacher's always going to look for brand new supplementary materials all the time. That would
No,
be
and
unreasonable.
I'm not saying they should, I'm just saying if it's,
Yeah.
when does it no longer become supplementary and it's a part of your instructional practice that needs to go through the principal and teaching and learning? Where is that, and do we need that in a policy? Because, and again, I just want to spark a conversation about these things. We don't need to, I just want to spark a conversation, and maybe we decide as a board that's not necessary, and it's not, maybe you're going to tell me that's not really happening, but do we need something in a policy that's, when does that become, or it's no longer supplemental, but it's a part of a program?
So I don't know that, I'll think on that a little bit more, but I'm not sure that that comes out at a policy piece.
Okay.
But to your point, support, and we're trying to use the word supporting materials.
Okay.
Not supplemental. Supplemental can sometimes be replacement of,
Okay.
right? Or supplanting. This is supporting. What are the supporting resources teachers use to support the core resources in the core instructional program? Now, there could be supporting resources that are used repeatedly from year to year to year or across all teachers at a grade level or course. When that happens, then I would make the case that that has moved from being a supporting resource to a core resource. Within our process of curriculum review, there is opportunity in that 10-year cycle for that ongoing curricular refinement. And so as part of that process, we can certainly identify these are now core resources that once were perhaps used in a more supporting framework.
Okay. And that's all I'm saying is like, when is something used, when is it no longer supporting and it's part of the core instruction and goes through a different process?
So can I just ask a clarifying question having to do with policy versus procedure? Now, I know that in these policies here, we have included a fair amount of procedure. just to sort of make it simple and easy to understand for people. But I'm wondering if there's even more procedure that isn't in here. Like, for instance, what is the actual procedure at the high school, for instance, when you want to, add supporting materials? And so does that perhaps go to what your concern is in terms of being very explicit about how that works, at a building level? Do those other kinds of procedures exist on a building level, and we're just not addressing them here because they're very operational,
Right.
and not at the
Absolutely.
level of policy. Is that
That's fair.
true?
Yep, that's accurate.
Okay.
Do we explicitly, and it's probably in here, I'm missing it, do we explicitly give teachers the ability to select? Are we giving them the power
should
to
have
recognize that? And I'm just
Yes.
missing
The what?
it. Okay.
Yes.
It's under the
Perfect.
supporting instructional.
Teachers may choose.
They talk
like
about it
that.
in
For
section.
supporting?
Yep, the supporting, and under definitions, C talks about that, and then it comes up later.
5D.
And 5, yep,
B.
good. D, 5.
I think you have to give teachers a certain amount of freedom, like
Right.
they
I
are
agree.
professionals,
I
and
totally
they need to
agree.
be able to select materials and not have to go through some crazy committee process every time they want to give an article to their
Yep.
students or
Correct.
something.
And I want to make sure that's explicit in our policies. That's why I'm asking that. And I'm
Yeah,
not-
Roman numeral 5, subsection D. What is it? D2B is the procedure for supporting
Perfect.
instructional
Okay.
resources.
I just wanted to make sure that was there.
Yep.
Okay.
One other note while we're on this page, that D section we did talk about in committee, and kind of delineating when teachers really do need to be proactive in getting approval from their principal before adding something that would be controversial, and acknowledging that sometimes there are valuable lessons in materials that are in fact controversial. And as long as it's appropriate, parents are informed, and that in that case, parents also have the opportunity to ask for supplemental material, or, nope, did I say the right one?
Alternative.
Alternative, thank you. Use the right language here. Alternative lessons in that case as well. So that also is spelled out in the policy under D.
And I can speak as a parent, and talking to other parents, the district does a phenomenal job doing that from what I hear in terms of sending out an email or making a notification. I've heard from many people, so.
While we're thinking, I just wanted to call out one other thing. Let's see, we're under section 5, 9, section 5, C9. We could scroll up just a little bit. I don't know who's manning the computer over there. Up a little bit more, C9, there it is.
And there it is.
Yes. So number 9 here. In our conversations on committee, it came out that there was a conversation in the World's Best Workforce about, in the model policy, instead of United States, it says American. And that there was some interesting discussion in the committee about having more precise language. And as we got our curriculum presentation even earlier tonight, it looks like we are aligning with that U.S. course name. So we did change the wording, so that does differ from the model policy a little bit, but it is more precise in how we, in the courses that we are teaching, by adding in United States in number 9, I think in number 10 as well, has the words United States as well. So thanks to the committee members who brought that to our attention. More thoughts on 606?
And
again-
it's very comprehensive, so.
Yeah, certainly you can always let us know, and we can either answer questions or have them discussed in committee as well, to dig into and integrate feedback into our policies.
Do you anticipate that with this updated policy that procedures will be attached at the bottom? Like, and I know in others we have.
Within the policy.
It all is within the policy?
Yes.
So, like, for example, in this policy, it references the challenge process that Superintendent Funk mentioned. Will there be a link to that challenge form at the same place? Or, because I know we've been trying to put those corresponding documents
Yep.
embedded within the policy for families, so that it's a quick.
Yeah, those forms, as of now, won't change.
Yep.
And so those are linked on the website currently.
Perfect.
And they will be linked.
And they'll be linked
Yeah.
here too. So just for ease of people finding things on the website. Perfect. Coming in new to the process, I think the work here was just fabulous. So thank you to the committee and thank you to the staff who I know has been worked tirelessly. And I would engage and hope that the community can weigh in too and express some of their thoughts and opinions. My last question is for our superintendent. Coming in new to this, you missed a lot of the work. Is there anything that you would alter or add to, or have you looked at this to see if you feel like everything's covered? I'm always interested in what you're thinking, so.
You know, I do a lot of default to the MSBA model policies. That's just my background. And I think in Stillwater here, we have a lot of our own take on things. So I'm just adjusting to, okay, how do we take the model policies and
Tweak them.
to kind of the way we've been doing things in Stillwater. And so again, and I'm not, as you've heard me say repeatedly, I'm not coming in here day one trying to change the world. And so I'm learning as we're going along here. So.
And I think just me being new to a board, I actually have to admit, I have the same question, that sometimes I was reading those model policy and I'm thinking, how much time are we having staff craft like this hybrid?
Right.
Versus if the model policy is nearly there, are we getting that bang for our buck of staff? Because we really want staff focused on the students and the learning and and I guess, I don't know if you have thoughts on that or if the committee has discussed that ever, but.
Like, why recreate the wheel?
Right, why are we recreating the wheel if we are limited in staff and they're new and we want curriculum updated and are you able to do what we need you to do from an academic student need standpoint and still manage intensive policy work? This is intensive policy work that you've done here. I don't know.
Well, and I would just add too that part of what we're working with here is that we have some extremely outdated policies. These policies have not been reviewed for 20 years. And I do think that part of the reason for that is just that we have been so intensive about going over every single one with the fine-tooth comb. And we've got, how many policies? Well over 100 policies. And, I think that does bear, exploration as to whether this is the appropriate way to do things. I think Caleb just did a masterful job of taking these extremely old policies that we had on instruction and trying to marry them with the most current MSBA policy, which I think was just updated within the year, right? Within this past year.
Yeah, this is a 2022 update.
Yes, right. And so, miraculous job there doing that. But how many hours did you put into that? And that is a question that I think we're going to have going forward is this the most appropriate way for staff to be using time?
And maybe Caleb and your team, or whoever, I'm sure there were many people behind the scenes that were helping you and having these discussions. Maybe there was value in the 600 series in looking at it this way, but I guess I really would look to staff to advise the board. Did we really justify all the time that went in where we could have went with the model policy, or maybe this is the series we want to do on our own, and then we want to look to the model policies moving forward in other areas?
And again, I think we do, at the policy level, at the policy committee, we do a lot of tweaking of language. And, Director Hocker and I have talked a little bit about this, and Dr. Cherry, my challenge has been, okay, we're really diving in, looking at this, but can we sit back a little bit and take, okay, what do they want us to do with this policy? And what are we trying to do right now currently? And then give it to somebody else to get in there and do the word crunching. And I think we could maybe get through some of them a little bit more efficiently, because I think a lot of times we just, here's the screen, okay, we're diving into it. So that's just a thought.
And I think just having an open dialogue about when it makes sense to do this kind of a deep dive, right? Because maybe, like I said, maybe this series made sense. I'm not on the committee, but maybe there's some efficiencies we can find through the model policies. And I know also the model policies, it makes the updating a lot easier, because I think some of these probably, in hindsight, like, why haven't they been touched in so long? Because there's other work that's going on. If you're not, and if we're writing our own, who's really tracking those? And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, 15 years goes by and no one's really looked at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the benefits of being part of the MSBA, right? I mean, we pay this money, they do all this policy work, and then they update it periodically to follow the laws and stuff. And if we take their policies and we move them around too much, we can't even use what they've done effectively. So I do think you want to really pay attention to that. Like, do we really want to change a lot of their policies? And if we do we keep track of what the changes are, so that when they change their policy, we can easily say, like, this is MSBA and this is the difference between the two?
Right. Yeah, I mean, all really great questions to discuss. I don't know if you have a thought.
Well, I think this is good conversation, and it's certainly appropriate. I think what I find interesting about what we've done with Policy 606 in particular, when you consider the model policy, I think it's the shortest, actually, of the 600 series that we're looking at today. The Stillwater version is by far the longest. And so I guess I would encourage you to look at the 606 model policy in comparison with the 606 from Stillwater. What is the level of detail, what is the level of direction that we provide? And again, I think this is the place for that conversation at the board table.
One final thought before we move on. Just in general, the work of the policy committee has really been to bring forward model policies. And we really haven't done a whole lot of tweaking of those model policies, with the exception of this series. This series, we kind of went in a different direction, and as we have been adopting these model policies, there's definitely been feedback of, why is this, like, when are we going to do the Stillwater version of this? Like, that there is a little bit of a desire to have more input from our old policies in these policies as well. So this was a bit of a different direction, and it also stemmed from those conversations when we've had curriculum adoption in the recent past, to try to address the needs of staff, to really lay out that procedure clearly so that the board understands, the community understands, and staff understands, so we are all on the same page.
I mean, it is excellent.
Policies.
Yeah,
so,
it's excellent work.
So yes, this is definitely a different way of approaching it. I don't necessarily recommend that this is how we do every set of policies, because this has been extensive in the work that has gone in on a staff side and also on a community side. Having the world's best workforce actively look at these policies, that was another component as well, is to get community feedback on these policies. So there were a lot of eyes on them, and it was a big process, and this is kind of what the results are. So this has all been good feedback.
And it's an important series, so. But just moving forward, I do think it's interesting to hear Dr. Funk say that, and something to consider moving forward. Great. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I guess just to reiterate, like, I know I didn't read these top to bottom yet, because we got them on Friday and it was a short week. So read through them, look at the models, look at what we've done, and provide that feedback back to the committee. Yep. Great.
Are the models in our packet as well?
They are not,
They're on
but-
the MSB website.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you need me to
You want
send
to
them
just send
to
me
you.
the
Yeah,
model
we
ones
can
and
send
stuff?
them.
That'll just be easier than me trying to poke around finding
Sure.
them.
All right, thank you.
I'm going to be faster than you.
Yeah, I was going to say, last item on the agenda is the second reading for new policy 522. This is,
You have the second reading of the Title IX Sex Non-Discrimination Policy on the board here. This is the second reading. We have had no feedback from board members or the public on this policy.
yep. Great. I have no questions on these.
Did anyone have questions on, what is this, 522? 522. Grab the right one here.
Nope.
Next, we have policy number 428, employee technology and internet access and acceptable use. We have received no feedback from the public or board members on this policy.
Any thoughts, concerns?
Nope. Not for me. Anyone else?
Everybody's sick of policy.
Next, we have policy number
We got a taste for your committee meetings, right?
524, student technology and internet access and acceptable use. Again, we've heard no feedback from the public or board members or staff members on this policy.
Great.
I think the other one had the same, like, if you go back to the one you just did before this, it might have said student technology in the first one.
I think I pulled up the wrong one.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I was like, I think they
522
were
and
the same
524,
ones. I'm
yeah.
like, what?
Is that because they're also focused on the last one?
I don't know.
Great. And then we had amended the agenda. There's no closed session or action items, so if there aren't any questions, seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.